Hello everyone, Alistair Gold here. Tottenham Hotspur are still top of the Premier League table. Yes, it's true. They're still there, which is obviously fantastic. Going into December, they are up there at the summit of the Premier League table. I should point out I do have a slightly sore eye. I'm not weeping at how awful to watch the match was at Stamford Bridge on Sunday. Just a little sore eye. But to crack on with that match itself, let's start there. Strange game. It was two teams boasting the most attacking riches you can possibly think of out there. Even the benches. You look at the benches that had Bale, Havertz, players like that on there ready to come on. And yet one real decent shot apiece from each side on target. It was a bit of a shocker, to be honest. It was almost like, well, it was exactly like Spurs turned up with the same game plan they had against Man City, soak up the attacks, break on the counter-attack, punish them. Unfortunately, Chelsea had obviously watched that Manchester City game and decided, you know what, we're not going to let you do that. Totally, really nullifying a lot of their own attacking endeavours to do so. Ben Chilwell very rarely got up his side of the pitch. Reece James occasionally in the second half did, but not so much in the first. It was such a kind of a weird stalemate of a game. It wasn't pretty to watch. But what I would say, it was a better result for Tottenham, I feel. It was a really strange thing I saw afterwards about on Sky, Jimmy Floyd Hasselbank saying something about all the pressure was on Tottenham to win the league, not Chelsea, because Chelsea had spent lots of money and needed their players to bed in. I didn't get that. I really didn't understand the logic of why the team that had spent more than £200 million were the ones with less pressure on winning the title. Very strange way of looking at it. But, I suppose as a former Chelsea guy, he's probably going to more see the Chelsea elements to things. But, I felt, to me, Tottenham coming away with a point from Stamford Bridge, albeit not particularly in the circumstances that, were particularly pleasing on the eye. I thought that was better for Tottenham. I thought Chelsea, as the home team, would have wanted to take the initiative. I know Lampard afterwards was making a big deal about dominating possession, things like that. And, he's savvy enough to know that really doesn't make any difference if the scoreline is what it is, I think with Chelsea, with the money they've spent, it's still very early days, but with the money they've spent and being the home side and having scored, a lot of Spurs a lot of their goal fests came slightly earlier in the season. More recently, it's been kind of grinding out results, but doing so, whereas Chelsea have probably scored more recently. You'd expected them to come into this match and continue to do so, or try to do so. So I kind of felt Spurs coming away with a better result than they did from Stamford Bridge last season. I think that was probably better for them than Chelsea. Spurs players were apparently really angry after the game in the dressing room with how they'd played and the result, which is a great thing. Mourinho said it afterwards. He said, "I'm really happy. We've in the fact that we've come away with a point from Stamford Bridge. We've pretty much nullified them until one shot, a couple of shots towards the end. We're top of the table." Yet the players are really unhappy. And he said, and I love that. That's a fantastic attitude to have. And he's right. He's right. It was such a weird game. Spurs, first half, you could see little threads of what they did against City and what was going to happen. Kane got a lot more time on the ball. He was starting counter-attacks. Some nice early moves. Bergwijn hitting the ball over the top. Aurier having that low shot saved by Mendy. And in the second half, it was almost like Chelsea retreated even further back to not take risks in certain areas, and that blocked off Tottenham's attempts to counter-attack. Lampard said quite correctly afterwards, I was really pleased with how we dealt with their counter-attack. That's true, but in doing so, kind of stopped his own team really having much of an attacking threat. It was a strange game to judge people on as well. I did my player ratings as I always do. And as you guys know that have watched my videos, I pretty much ignore all replies afterwards because it's just all very subjective, isn't it? That's what player ratings are. We all see it in very different ways. But I did find that was a really hard game to judge because even the attackers didn't really attack. They were defending well, but ultimately they weren't doing what they were meant to be doing. Obviously they were instructed a lot of times to do that. Same with the fullbacks. The fullbacks were instructed to stay deeper, didn't do as much of the attacking work that we know both of them can do. So it's such a difficult way to judge it. We'll kind of talk about that with certain players as it comes on. But, ultimately, when you're looking at the headline angle of it, Tottenham are still 9 games unbeaten in the Premier League, which is the longest run of anyone in the Premier League right now. I think Chelsea are 8 unbeaten. And, there was a little funny comment at the end. Mourinho in the press conference, they were talking about a title race and horses in the race. And he asked his press officer, he said, what's the name for a young horse, a little horse? I think technically the word he was looking for was like a foal, a young horse that is to grow into a thoroughbred racehorse. But his press officer actually gave him the word pony, which, as we all know, isn't the same thing. It's you wouldn't race ponies against horses because they're not going to do very well. But I think the logic behind what he was trying to say was, that Spurs. I mean, the analogy he used, which I think some people strangely took as being a bit of a disparaging comment, but it wasn't. It was to say, look, we had a guy coming out there, a new signing. He's come from Swansea in the Championship. Chelsea's new defensive recruit is Thiago Silva, one of the best, and he said one of the best defenders in the world still, and I think he even made the comment that probably a month of Thiago Silva's salary could pay Joe Rodon's yearly wage. And that's the point he's making. It's like, we're not going to throw us out. I'm going to talk about Pochettino in a second, so apologies for people that get bored of talking about Pochettino. But, I mean, I've got to say, what Mourinho essentially is saying is we're not financially even in the same league as the teams fighting for the title. So don't put us in the title race. We're up there, and of course they're going to have a go. Of course they want to win every game and try and do it. But you can't say a team that spend a fraction of what the other teams spend, wages, transfers, whatever you want to call it, revenue, you can't say that they're really in that race. And what I meant by the Pochettino stuff is that's something that Mauricio Pochettino would say week in, week out, and he used to get criticised for it. And it's kind of like Mourinho's come out with it as like, well, yeah, but it won't stop people. Of course, people will still expect certain things from Tottenham. Lampard said afterwards a strange comment about how much Spurs spent in the summer. Spurs didn't spend a lot in the summer. They spent really cleverly. But, to compare Chelsea spending with Spurs, you're talking about chalk and cheese, ridiculous amounts. But, yeah, I did like we'll call it the pony analogy, but he was actually talking about a young horse because it took my mind back. I remembered him saying something similar at Chelsea. So I had a little look up. In February 2014 at Chelsea, he said that I think he was asked about, are Chelsea in the title race because they were right up there at the top. And he said, no, we're just a young horse that needs milk to grow and learn how to jump. Maybe next season we'll be able to do so. Chelsea finished third that season, just 4 points off the title, and the next season they won the Premier League. So, this guy knows what he's talking about. Whatever criticism you can have about Mourinho, criticism about the tactics, the way he goes about it, the very pragmatic approach that Tottenham have under him in these big games, the guy knows what he's doing because he's been there and he's done it. And I just thought that was really interesting that he was looking at the horse analogy. He clearly feels there's something's building there. Whether it happens this season would be amazing, but for him it kind of feels like you feel he's gearing towards next season. But hey, top of the table, let's see what happens. So let's go a little bit closer into the match. I think the biggest problem for me was passing. And Mourinho actually said this afterwards as well, a lot of Tottenham's attempts to counter-attack just kind of floundered in the midfield somewhere. Some of the stats just weren't great. I mean, Tongué Dembele, oh my goodness, the turn he did. I think we're going to have one of these every week. I apologise. We're going to have a Tongué Dembele appreciation moment because he did this. We did two. He did a turn in the middle of the pitch and he did another turn down at the touchline, which, they were Dembele-esque, but then some. And I loved Moussa Dembele as a player, but for me, Tongué Dembele has the potential to be even more. He's just incredible. But I think the one thing with Tongué Dembele's play was maybe his passing at the end of the lovely minutes. I think he had about 75% passing rate. To be fair to him, he was trying stuff. That's what you want to see. But then Lo Celso came on after him, and he had a passing success rate of 58.8%. And it shows you that the creative players maybe just weren't quite kind of threading those balls through that needed to be. And, Spurs' best shot, the one on target that forced Mendy into a save, was from their right back, Serge Aurier, and it kind of sums up some of the problems there, and other areas like. And I don't want to slate them because they did really well. Like Højbjerg and Musa Sissoko, you could see the difference in the stats where Højbjerg had 93% passing success, whereas Sissoko alongside him, who was constantly covering for Aurier and coming back even in defence at points just to cover and help, but his passing success rate was just 69%. And you saw that a few times. He burst into the Chelsea half and you thought, okay, here's the counter-attack. And then you kind of have that moment is going to happen with Sissoko where he's like, oh, like a deer in the headlights kind of thing, where he's suddenly like, right, what do I do now? How do I pass? What do I do? And he often will play either a ball that goes backwards, doesn't do anything, or he'll try a ball that just doesn't really end up with anyone. Lo Celso late on. Such a talented player. And Spurs had that massive moment when Zuma gave the ball away and it came to Lo Celso on the edge of the box and you thought, you're going to do something with this, man. And he kind of neither shot nor passed. It was like this weird curling ball into touch, which didn't go near anybody. I think it was that passing that just let everyone down. But, it was kind of not just about the success rate. I thought Kane, Son and Bergwijn had really weird games to judge because, like I say, I thought Kane played well first half. Second half, Chelsea essentially gave him so little space he couldn't really do anything. Son and Bergwijn had their moments. Bergwijn, obviously, with that early shot. They all had really kind of, especially Bergwijn and Son, really had defensive instructions from Mourinho, told what to do. And I think that showed in, for example, Son's passing. Son's passing stat, I saw it was 93.9% success rate, which on paper sounds fantastic. But actually, when you kind of look at it, it shouldn't be that high for an attacker because he should be trying creative things. He should be risking. He should be doing this and that. And I think that says a lot, not about Son, but more about the fact that Mourinho was getting to do so much defensive work that a lot of passing from Son was straight, sideways, here's the ball, I've done my work defensively kind of stuff. And that's why he's got a very similar passing success rate to Højbjerg, who does the same stuff. So I think that kind of says a lot. And then you look at Reguilon and Aurier. I said earlier, they were so restricted in what they did. There was one moment, second half, I think it was, where Reguilon burst up the pitch, put a cross in that really wasn't very good. Højbjerg came across to cover, but as Reguilon went past the dugout, Mourinho was ripping into him for making that run up the pitch. They had the handbrake on, let's put it that way. It's probably the best way to say it. Some people will say that's wrong and they'll look at Dele going to the bridge with Spurs and Spurs winning at the bridge and them saying, look, you can do it the right way. That's once in 35 occasions. I think Spurs went to Stamford Bridge and won. It's not something that happens a lot. And, Mourinho afterwards was essentially cheering the fact that he couldn't remember having ever gone to Stamford Bridge as an opposing manager or the manager of Chelsea and having the opposing team, the visiting team, only have one real save to make from their goalkeeper, which was the case with Lloris. But yeah, that was strange. There was a really weird moment. You've got to find a video. I saw it of Højbjerg shields the ball back to Lloris and goes and celebrates. And you go, like, that was weird. There was like no one around him, but that kind of showed the mentality was just shut up shop. But unfortunately, without the attacking quality, let's say, that they had against Man City. And let's talk about Joe Rodon. His full debut, kind of got wind of that earlier in the day that he was going to start. I think we kind of knew it was likely. Bearing in mind, Sanchez wasn't even getting on the bench ahead of him in the Premier League. It's a funny game. It was mixed. I'd say it's one of those where you're going to be ultra brutal and critical. You'll say he made two big mistakes. The first one led to a disallowed goal for Timo Werner. He got caught up the pitch on the ball, and they counter-attacked in the space behind him. Then he obviously had that late weak header back to Lloris, which Giroud intercepted, but thankfully had his own weak shot that Lloris just grabbed quite comfortably. But you could look at that quite brutally and say, hey, he's made two big mistakes in a big game. Spurs could have lost that 2-0 and that could have been that. But on the whole, his actual performance was quite promising. There were lots of really good moments in there. He panicked a little bit on the ball, a bit nervy in possession, but I felt he dealt really well with a lot of the defensive work he had to do. Pretty much dominated Tammy Abraham for long periods. There's some moments where, I've seen Abraham's getting criticised for not getting headers on target. I kind of feel that's because of the work Rodon was doing and putting him off, challenging him for the ball. Made some really good headers and interceptions. He did well for a full debut, first Premier League start at Stamford Bridge against Chelsea. I thought he did very well. I thought he did well. Let's not go as far to say very well. He did well. I think there's a lot to build on. There's real foundations there. They've got a lot of hope for him at Spurs. Mourinho's been really impressed with him in training. Like I said before, he came on against Man City for those final 10 minutes, and you couldn't really see a difference in Spurs' defensive efforts after Alderweireld went off. And I think that was a massive compliment. I think it was a real learning process for him on Sunday. He'll take that on. Probably will play in the North London derby. Unless Sanchez is absolutely incredible against Lask this week. But you'd imagine it will be Rodon, especially with fresh legs. So he's going to get more chances to show what he can do. And I think there's a lot more to come from him. And, Mourinho's not holding back on him. After the Werner moment, he got ripped into by both Mourinho and Sacramento for coming that far up the pitch near the halfway line and losing it when he didn't need to. And, obviously we had the Thiago Silva comparison. It's all about learning. The guy was playing, like we say, in the Championship last season. He Wales international, but we're not talking about mass. I think Mourinho said his biggest game experience has been playoffs and obviously international matches, whereas this is going to be a real learning process. We saw it. I'd say Japhet Tanganga last year, thrown against Liverpool, probably for me had a better debut. Japhet Tanganga's a whole other thing. I asked Mourinho about him this week, about why he wasn't mentioning him as a centre-back, and he said he sees him as a full-back now, which is it's quite interesting, really, bearing in mind Tanganga went through the entire academy and has grown up as a centre-back, trained to be a centre-back, didn't really play at full-back for the academy sides, and now kind of Mourinho's decided that's where he's at, which I think is tough on him, because I think you've got two people on either side. He's very rarely going to play at full-back, to be honest, but it's quite interesting that after he said that, he played him straight away at centre-back against Ludogorets, but kind of needs must. I kind of understood that one. But yeah, on Rodon, I think there's enough in there to see what you can do. I think he's a player that can be moulded. He's just turned 23 not too long ago. We're going to come back to him when we talk. I'm going to talk about the January transfer window a little bit later. I think he's going to play a big part in what happens in that as well. But yeah, who else? Dyer. Interestingly, Mourinho dug him out a little bit when he was talking about Rodon, saying that, Rodon made a couple of mistakes, but Dyer made more. I think what he was saying, he even said it in possession. I think with Dyer, I marked him quite highly in my ratings, and some people went a little bit mad about that. But the point was, defensively, I thought he was brilliant, Dyer. I think as a centre-back and in his defensive work, he's getting better and better and better. This is a run of games now where I think they struggled to get past him. His biggest problem of the day was he decided in his head that he was going to be Toby Alderweireld. And Eric Dyer can play a nice crossfield ball. I've seen him do it a few times. I think, unless I'm completely wrong, maybe he set up Delhi for one of the goals at Stamford Bridge. Or certainly a goal against Chelsea. I feel like it was a Dyer ball over the top. And Eric Dyer, not just a Dyer ball. But his passing against Chelsea this weekend was absolutely horrific. Some of the passes just were so easy to cut out. And actually, people weren't maybe taking into account in my ratings. I actually would have rated him higher. I gave him an 8. I would have actually given him a 9, maybe even more, because I thought he was that good defensively. But his passing actually knocked him down. So, yeah, I don't know if people thought I should have given him a 6 or something like that, but I actually think defensively he's becoming a proper rock for Tottenham. And a lot of people maybe that criticising that side of his game you're kind of going to struggle to now. I think he's becoming a bit of a leader at the back there. And yeah, he's just got to not play silly balls because they were ridiculous. And a word, and I think I did this maybe last week, a word for Hugo Lloris, honestly. As I have a Tanguy Ndombele appreciation moment every week, I feel like maybe it's about the French. Maybe I'm having an appreciation moment for Lloris every week because for me, since the return, since returning from lockdown the first time last season, I think Lloris has been brilliant. He's had obviously a lot of the possession stuff taken away from him, so he doesn't need to do the little passes and stuff he was doing under Pochettino towards the end. So those silly kicking errors are kind of out of his game now, and that's making him more confident. And you're seeing that in his handling. I just feel his concentration levels are incredible. Barely anything to do at Stamford Bridge on Sunday, but yet in those final moments, Mount shot from distance, bang, down, probably unsighted, I'd say, with that shot as well, pushed it away. And then when Giroud came out, it kind of, I know Giroud's his mate as well, but he just didn't look like he was going to get beaten. He made himself big, rushed out straight away, and Giroud just really couldn't get the ball over him. I think Lloris, it kind of makes me not chuckle because I don't mean to be patronising, but there were a couple of years back, people were talking about Paolo Gazzaniga potentially taking Lloris's spot. I think you see now, and this is no kind of digging out Gazzaniga, but I just think you see how high a level Lloris is now. He's 33 and arguably he's probably maybe playing the best football of his career. I think he's just such a terrific goalkeeper, and I think he's slightly unappreciated, maybe in the wider sense of things. I'm not talking about Tottenham fans, I'm talking about all football fans, maybe because he's maybe not as showy as other goalkeepers, he's not as loud, maybe not as much as a crazy character. But I think he should really be considered up there. He's a World Cup winner as well. He's such a good goalkeeper. And he's a proper leader in that team as well. Like I say, I said this before, but without the crowd, you properly can hear him now and what he's saying to that team. So there we have it. That was that match in a nutshell, really. One that I don't think people will dwell on too long, but I think it was important in the grand scheme of, we started this run of doom, as it were. Spurs have beaten Man City, come away from Stamford Bridge with a point. 4 points from those two games. You'd have probably taken that, let's be honest. And you'd definitely take Tottenham being top of the table. So it wasn't pretty, but it was effective, It was whacked a bit with the ugly stick a few times, that match. But ultimately, this pragmatic Tottenham that we see in these big matches, this difficult to beat Tottenham, it's doing the job. It is doing the job. Defensively, best defence in the Premier League. They've, certainly on the numbers. Excuse me, they've conceded less goals than any other team in the Premier League. It's all there on paper. So all these concerns that people have had about the defence, we should sign this person, sign that person. Defence is what's going to let Tottenham down. Defence is holding Tottenham up. This, completely opposite. Hopefully Alderweireld, won't be too long. They said between 2 and 4 weeks he'll be out with his groin injury, adductor muscle, I think it is. So hopefully he'll be back sooner rather than later. Saw a bit of he did put one of those classic, might as well have a Rocky music montage on it of him doing some training the other day. And, he looked like he's moving quite well. So hopefully we're not looking at too long. But like I say, big chance for Rodon in the meantime to show what he can do. So I said I'd talk about the January transfer window. So let's have a little chat about that. Because we are exactly a month today. This is being recorded from the January transfer window opening, which is mad. Feels like only yesterday we kind of got out of that summer transfer window. I think the summer transfer window kind of will dictate how probably quite quiet this January transfer window will be on the whole in terms of incoming, certainly. Because just to remind people, because we all get very excited. Fans, journalists, myself, we get very excited about transfers. We play our FIFAs and our football managers, and we maybe oversimplify how easy it is to sell a player, and we get a little bit carried away with players that are far too expensive to sign for football clubs. But I think we had to look again at what a good summer transfer window it was. Let's reel them off. Højbjerg, Hart, Doherty, Reguilon, Bale, Vinicius, Rodon. 7 players. Did I say all 7? I hope I did. 7 players of top quality there. And that filled all pretty much of the gaps that Tottenham had in their squad. And Mourinho's delighted with his squad. We know Rodon came in after a failed attempt by Milan Skriniar from Inter Milan. He was very much signed more as a project of a player, but I think, as I kind of hinted at earlier, these next few weeks are quite crucial, really, because if Roden shows that, I'm ready for this, I'm ready for the Premier League, and he gets better and better and better, um, the need to then go into a market for another centre back kind of becomes slightly redundant because you look at it and you'll have Roden, Dyer, Alderweireld, Sanchez, Tanganga, and Davies. Obviously, so you've got 6 players that can all play at centre back. I don't know, especially in a year where things are tight financially. I know we want to forget that. We know we look at it, like I say, with a little bit of a FIFA view sometimes of but I want to trade this or get this player out, bring this player in. But we mustn't forget the fact that Spurs lost £64 million last season. That's on their statement recently, and they've projected, if fans don't come back in big numbers, that they could lose up to 150 million next year. So anyone expecting Spurs to go out there and buy an incredibly expensive player, it's just not going to happen. Even let's say Skriniar, there's no indication whatsoever that Inter Milan have dropped down from their 45-50 million pound price tag. Spurs at the time never wanted to go over 32 million, and he's playing regularly. I think he tested positive for COVID, so was out for a couple of weeks. But other than that, he's pretty much started every single match this season for Inter Milan. So you're not talking about a player who is on the fringes, isn't playing, they just want to get him off the books. It's not that case. So you're looking at big money for a player that, like I say, it becomes a point where when you've got the best defence in the Premier League and you've got a young player that, if he plays well and continues to develop and adapt, it kind of brings someone else in to block him for a very expensive fee that you can't really afford. And also, and again, people don't like this because it kind of brings them back to maybe reality slightly, or just reminds them Spurs have a foreign player issue. They've got 3 too many players, for their Europa League squad. Gazaniga, Jensen, both can't play in that. Joe Rodon cannot play in that. He can be registered in the knockout stages come, I think it's end of January, maybe early February, you have to register for that. But he doesn't count as a homegrown player. He counts as a foreign player. So even with that in mind, someone's got to come out of that squad just for him to get into it. This is all obviously if Tottenham do qualify for the knockout stages. So all of this kind of, I see how the internet works and social media works, and Spurs linked with this foreign player, this foreign person from another continent, club, country, whatever you want to call it. And you kind of think, yeah, okay, that's great. Okay, talented player. Who comes out of the squad, though, for them to come in? And it's a problem that Spurs have kind of had for a while. And it hasn't gone away. If anything, it's kind of got worse. Because when I said earlier about sometimes we kind of simplify how easy it is to get players out of clubs, Spurs are one of the worst for that. Danny Rose was playing yesterday in the under-23s because although he's an England international, was and maybe could still be, and has been in the past one of the best left-backs in the Premier League in Europe, Spurs cannot offload him. I don't even think Spurs would take a fee for him at this point. He's only got 7 months left in his contract. They cannot find, or his agent or whoever cannot find a club for him to go and play football at, which is mad. And this is what I mean when I say about simplifying sometimes. Like, I've seen people saying on the internet today on Twitter, it's easy. We sell Dele, Winks and Sanchez and we bring in blah, 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 blah. No, it doesn't work like that. That's not how football works. It isn't like a trading game. I don't know why I did that accent, by the way. It could have any accent in the world. But yeah, so I think Spurs will do what they always do in transfer windows. They'll be creative. They'll look at opportunities out there. Suddenly things appear and they just think that's an investment. They almost look at it as a business thing. Bergwijn last January was similar. We know Spurs, this just shows exactly how transfer windows can be completely opposite of what you expect. Like Spurs went into that transfer window just looking for a striker. That was the main thing. Then they had loads of injuries, didn't they? We had Kane, Son, Sissoko, all of them out. So Spurs in the end ended up bringing in Gedson Fernandes on loan to bolster midfield options, and Steven Bergwijn just was a deal that was too good to turn down. Someone that had looked at, excuse me, I'm really dry-throated today. So they brought him in. Never ended up getting that striker because this is the other issue, the January window, is that there aren't a lot of options. I think they call it, I think I've heard a few people, I think Pochettino used to call this, Steve Hitchen, I think in the Amazon documentary said it's a window of opportunity. It's not one to plan for, really, because it's so difficult. Teams who are going down don't want to give up players in case it does send them down. Teams fighting for the top don't want to lose players because you're in a period where the games come thick and fast, and you know that some of these players that maybe aren't playing right now will suddenly get minutes and be far more important than they at that point seem. Sergio Reguilon was another one this summer. Spurs didn't even go into the summer window looking for a left back. Then Reguilon, they got wind that this player that they loved for a long time became available for a very good price. They went and got it done. So I'm certainly not ruling out any little creative moves like that. But the issue you've got to look at now is in that squad is where do players come in and fit? There are so many players who cannot even get on that Tottenham bench right now. You know, even at the weekend, look at it, you had Ali and Winks couldn't get on there. And what do you think about that? That's two top young European talent, both England internationals. You know, they couldn't get on there. There's, people to see Marcel Sabitzer, as I've said before. You know, player that Spurs love, but they haven't really been in, or they hadn't at that point been in touch at all about him because terrific player, but where does he fit? Who comes out? And I think summer is when you make big signings. January is when you kind of react. You know, Spurs got a couple of bad injuries. Yeah, they might look to bring in cover to make sure if they've got serious injuries. But I can't see this being a busy window after a window where they've brought in 7 players. The summer window shocked Mourinho. He did not expect to get as much of what he wanted out of that window as he did. He's very happy around the club. Absolutely. A lot of people I've spoken to within the club have said he's in a really good place right now. Never, they don't know how long it will last because he's a guy that likes to challenge, provoke and push people to heights. But in terms of his mentality, he is always a smile on his face, very, very jovial right now. So he's not a guy that is telling Levy or Steve Hitchin, get out there and sign me this player. I want this player, otherwise we can't do this. He's been very realistic about stuff. So we're not going to be. Of course we're not. I like to write about transfer stuff. You guys all want to see transfers come in and out and all that, but I don't know quite how. I mean, Spurs notoriously don't do a lot in January. So it's very unlikely to be that way. He's got a terrific squad. Can't get away from that either. I mean, like I said, Rose is one obviously they'll want to get out. I do believe they'll have a chat with Benfica about the Jedson Fernandez loan. It's been a bit of a disaster. I do feel sorry for the kid. He's got a hell of a lot of potential, but is a player without a position. Hasn't really come in and done what they'd hoped. Not registered in Europa League with probably the 1 point to get minutes. Not even looking like he's getting near to a Premier League squad. Pretty sure I remember being told in the summer that one of the issues was it's quite an expensive loan deal, so it's kind of why would Benfica want to come out of it, as it were. But I'm sure they'll have a chat with Benfica anyway and just say, look, if we can end it 6 months early, you get your player back, and maybe the same with the finances they come to a mutual agreement on, because it's no good for the player either. He needs to play football, and he's just not. And probably say that with the numbers in there, Spurs don't really need him anymore. I think he was needed last season with Sissoko out as a kind of, maybe they saw him as a bit of an heir to Sissoko, but I think it was a big old future fee as well, something like 50 million or something, some big fee I remember. So Spurs aren't going to pay anywhere near that. So it's not coming to that conclusion where it's going to be a happy one for the player or Benfica anyway. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens with that, but I can't see any logic to, unfortunately, keeping him for the rest of the season unless there's a massive injury crisis. And the other player, not in European registration, Paulo Gazzaniga. As I've said way back, Spurs were willing to offload him towards the end of the transfer window. Good keeper, decent keeper, but he's been ousted by Joe Hart. Joe Hart is the main second-choice goalkeeper right now. Gazzaniga isn't playing in any cup competitions. Whether he plays against Stoke, I don't know. I think we'll find out. But Joe Hart will probably want to play that game. And if he's not playing in Europa, you kind of see it as a position where you've brought in someone on a free transfer. And from a business point of view, if you can get a fee for Gazzaniga and he wants to go and get minutes, you'd imagine any player would. It kind of does make sense to kind of see what offers come in for him. Even if it's a loan that they get some money for. And then Alfie Whiteman probably steps up Or Brandon Austin's still there. I wouldn't be shocked if they try and get Brandon Austin another loan, the England under-21 keeper. But yeah, they've got enough options there that I think Ghazni can go on, which is a shame. Like I say, he's highly rated by a lot of people. For me, I personally, when he got that run of games when Lloris was out, I didn't think he covered himself in glory and showed that he should be a number one choice. And I think I get the impression that's what Mourinho took away from that as well, which is why we saw Hart come in. But yeah, shame. You know, he's a good keeper. He's certainly not a bad keeper by any stretch of imagination. Dele Alli obviously is a big one as well. Personally, I think, well, I know there's a lot of people within Tottenham that believe that he just needs to get his rhythm back, he just needs to get his head down, and it will come good for him. And they kind of point to Tanguy Ndombele as a perfect example of someone who looked like they were on the verge of leaving the club, and now is pretty much one of the first names on the team sheet from Mourinho. He's really, really pleased with him. With Dele, there's no doubt in his quality. You know, he was one of the best players in Europe, young midfielders in Europe. He's still only 24. I can't see Spurs selling him. And to be honest, from what I was told in the summer, a loan move was something they weren't really looking at all. Because, you know, I suppose from Spurs' point of view, slightly embarrassing to have to loan out a player of that quality to what would be a very big team. He's not likely to go anywhere that's a small team. And like I say, I think you'll see a lot of... I think Dele will get opportunities. I think there will be players out injured in the weeks and months ahead. I thought he did well against Ludogorets in the Europa League. I thought Mourinho said first half especially he was very good. And that's what you just want to see. When he gets an opportunity, he has to grab it. There's a place for him in this Tottenham team. There is. I don't think Spurs will always be about the width with the people out wide. So he can play as one of those three. I think he can take on the Ndombele or Lo Celso role. I think that's probably what he's got to aim for. And just show a little bit more, you know, playing that number 10 role behind Kane or Vinicius, whoever it is. And... excuse me, I've gone really dry throated. And, you know, talking too much, obviously. I wouldn't write off Dele right now. I think it's too early to do so. I think there's more to come from Dele. Let's see what happens. But I'd be very surprised if they let him go in January. So I'm just going to have a quick drink. There you go. A first for that. Never had to have a drink from waffling too much, but there you go. So, yeah, Dele, I'd be surprised. I think the same goes for, like I say, someone today saying, get rid of Harry Winks in January and bring in another holding midfielder. Harry Winks, he was quite public on England duty, said quite, you know, vocally that, you know, we'll see where we're going. I'm not obviously delighted with the lack of minutes that I'm getting, but we'll see where we're going. I wouldn't imagine January is any time that Spurs will think about anything to do with Harry Winks. As I say, foreign player issue, he's a homegrown player, one of their own. As I've always said a million times, I think he just needs to find his role. So, yeah, I don't think you're looking at January. He's going out anywhere. All you need is Højbjerg or Sissoko to get injured, and Winks comes into that midfield and could be playing every game for the rest of the season, depending on what the injury is. And I know people that don't like him will say this is madness, but I think he's actually too important as a squad player to let him go. And I think the same goes for... Davinson Sanchez right now. Davinson Sanchez, same with Winks and all that. Right now, you've got the Europa League games. They will be playing pretty much once a week at least. They will getting minutes. They'll be playing matches. Sanchez, I think for all of these players, the likes of Dele, Winks and Sanchez, I think is summer. Next summer, you look at the situation and you tell yourself, right, is this going to improve? Am I going to get more minutes? Does the manager see me as a first choice, or do I need to go somewhere where I can be a first choice? And then the next step is, if the club agree, then what kind of prices are out there? Because all of those players are big money. Dele, whatever his form right now, it's all about what he can do and his potential. Massive price tag. Winks, even with those who don't rate him, he's an England international, would have a big price tag. Davinson Sanchez, formerly Spurs club record signing. He's not going anywhere for a cheap price. This is kind of, maybe with some players, has been Spurs' downfall in selling them in the past. They haven't been able to sell them because they have very set values for players. So yeah, I'd be stunned if any of those three leave the club in January. I think this is a squad thing, and also Spurs might do something this season. I think, as all of them, you'd be gutted if this was a point you left Spurs halfway through the season where actually maybe they managed to pick up a bit of silverware, or even stayed in that title race all the way through. It's a squad game. They're going to get minutes. I think they'd be mad to move on. And I think all three of them can become the players they can be, whatever you want to put it. I think all of them. I think Winks has just got to really find his role and find exactly and be more progressive in his play, like he was at points against Ludogorets. I think Ali just has to get back in his rhythm, has to work hard, and just concentrate on being a player. You know, he's such a terrific guy, such a great character around the squad, but he's so talented, and just channel that, and you'll get the Delhi you did. And Davinson Sanchez, I think there's a terrific defender in there. I think he just has the habit of making silly mistakes occasionally. You know, if he'd made the mistakes that Rodon made against Chelsea, people would be absolutely slaughtering him. I think he just needs to cut that out, find some consistency, and then I think he'll win over Mourinho. But it's whether he gets the chances to this season or not. But like I say, he will get minutes. So yeah, I'd be stunned if any of those you see head out. I mean, loan-wise, it'd be interesting to see what they do with Jack Clark. They rebuffed a lot of championship offers for him to head out on loan in summer because they Mourinho was really pleased with him in training, wanted to see him develop alongside, learn from Bale, Son, Kane, people like that. And now you maybe look at it in January and you just think, right, okay, so we've given you a few minutes here and there in the Europa League. Is it time now for you to head off? Sorry, absolute throat nightmare today. Is it time for you now to head off and just get that little end of season run as a regular somewhere in the Championship? Have another drink. Is it time for now just to get a bit of minutes, bit of experience, bit of just increase the development? People like George Marsh, Anthony Georgiou, I think they really need to get out there and loan and get some experience, continue their loan journeys, as it were. I'm trying to think who else needs to get out. I see other people saying about younger players. I think the likes of maybe Harvey White and Dennis Sirkin need to just stick around. This is their first real full year with the first team. Keep doing that, getting used to the first team and developing. Little shout out to Dane Scarlett as well for becoming the youngest ever player to play for Tottenham Hotspur, which is fantastic. And he almost scored. Oh my word. He did really, really well actually in his little cameo. Just 16 years old, beat John Bostock's record. John Bostock left a really nice message us on Twitter, congratulating him and passing the baton, as it were. He's doing very well for the under-18s, one to keep an eye on. But we're talking about 16-year-olds there that just need to learn and keep going. So I think we've pretty much covered the transfer window there. I'm sure in the comments you'll throw all of these exciting names at me that Spurs should sign. But if you do, I want you to realistically tell me who leaves to make way for them and how Spurs get the finances. Let's have a bit of fun with it. Well, that doesn't really sound very fun, does it? It sounds a bit pragmatic and realistic. North London derby. First, obviously, Lask in the Europa League. You'd imagine he'll make a lot of changes again. But then the North London derby with fans back. Yes. Can't wait to look across from the press box and see those fans there. About 2,000. Exactly 2,000 I think it's going to be. I think there's some possibly going to some partners and hospitality or something, but not many. But the bulk of them will be in the South Stand, which is brilliant. I wrote a little piece on this the other day saying that's actually an advantage for Spurs over other clubs. That South Stand, the acoustics, it's all designed. If anyone's done the Skywalk, I've been fortunate enough to do that. They get you to shout down from above the South Stand into the ground, and you hear your shouts just reverberating around the ground. So even just 2,000 fans in that South Stand is going to be noisy. And for a North London derby, what a game to have them back for as well. Tottenham in good form in terms of results. Chelsea, Arsenal having a bit of a nightmare at the moment. It's one of those where it's never a good time to ever play each other because I think form goes out the window slightly in a derby, but it could be a really, really good match and great to have the fans back. I just can't wait, honestly. It hasn't been the same without you, or it really hasn't. And then a little kind of nod as well to Spurs have, if you haven't seen, have drawn Marine, a team from up kind of, I think it's Crosby Way, near Liverpool, in the FA Cup third round in January. And just incredible. They play in Northern Premier League Northwest Division. To put that into context, if you live locally in like the Essex, Hertfordshire, kind of outer London area, that's like someone like Ware, Hertford, Canvey Island, that kind of level, Waltham Abbey, playing and getting drawn against Jose Mourinho's Tottenham Hotspur coming to the team. I think I saw someone, I'm not sure if it's true or not, that it could be the biggest gap ever between two clubs in Premier League history in terms of league places, which is incredible for them. They'll have fans. They're allowed to have 2,000. I think their capacity is maybe slightly above that. And obviously distance and things, how it works, we'll see. But they will get fans. Hopefully they'll get some TV money as well. Enormous for that club in a really, really tough time for non-league clubs as well, which is brilliant. That is where the FA Cup absolutely rules. And it'd be interesting to see whether Mourinho does what Pochettino used to do, which is bring a big player or two, like a Kane or a Son, and have them on the bench just for the local people and everything. We'll see. But I love that. That draw came out. I was just like, that's brilliant. What a tie. So there you go. Right. I've got to head off, but hopefully we packed in loads in there. Like I say, Lask on Thursday, then the North London derby. I shall do a video obviously after that, and hopefully we've got good things to say about that, because everyone wants a North London derby win, don't they, quite frankly. Tottenham Hotspur, top of the table, top of the Europa League group, pretty sure, and the North London derby on the horizon, and fans coming back into grounds. Fingers crossed, things looking positive right now, and then let's keep them that way. So, as always, stay healthy, stay safe, and I shall talk to you later. Bye.